Okay, here's my story. It still feels a bit like a knot in my stomach when I think about it, even now. My name is Maya, and when I say new girl, I mean new. New town, new school, new everything. Mom got a big promotion, which was great. For her. But for me, at 15, it felt like my world had been picked up and shaken like a snow globe, then set down somewhere completely unfamiliar. The old snow globe had friends I'd known since kindergarten. This new one just had snow. And a big scary building called Northwood High. The first day was a blur of wrong turns and mumbled apologies as I bumped into people. My clothes felt wrong. My backpack felt wrong. Even the way I walked felt wrong. I've always been a bit quiet, more of a listener than a talker, and in a place where everyone already knew everyone else, my quietness felt like a giant, flashing neon sign that read, "Look at me, I don't belong." It was in the cafeteria, on that very first day that I met them. Jessica, Tiffany, and Chloe. Jessica was the leader, you could tell. She had this way of looking at you, like she was sizing you up and had already decided you weren't worth much. Tiffany and Chloe were her shadows, giggling at everything she said, their eyes darting to her for approval. I was trying to find an empty table, my tray feeling wobbly in my sweaty hands. There was one near the window, a bit isolated, which suited me fine. As I walked past their table, Jessica stuck her foot out. I didn't see it. My tray went flying. Mashed potatoes, green beans, and a carton of milk splattered across the floor. And me, sprawled right in the middle of it. The laughter was instant. Not just from their table, but it rippled through the cafeteria. Sharp, high-pitched giggles from Tiffany and Chloe, a cool, amused smirk from Jessica. My face burned. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I scrambled to pick up the mess, my hands shaking, tears pricking my eyes. No one helped. A teacher eventually came over and shooed me towards the office to get cleaned up, but the image of their laughing faces was seared into my brain. That was just the beginning. Every day became a little exercise in avoidance. I learned their schedules, the routes they took between classes, so I could try to be somewhere else. It didn't always work. They'd accidentally bump into me in the halls, sending my books scattering. "Oops, sorry, new girl," Jessica would sneer, not sounding sorry at all. They'd whisper when I walked by, just loud enough for me to hear fragments. "Look at her hair. So last year." Or, "Did you see those shoes? Thrift store special." My locker became a target. Chewing. Gum stuck in the keyhole. Mean notes slipped through the vents. "Go back where you came from. Nobody likes you." Once, they even managed to switch my math textbook with a first-grade reader right before a test. The teacher, Mr. Henderson, looked at me with such disappointment when I couldn't answer anything. I tried to explain, but the words got stuck in my throat, and Jessica and her friends were snickering in the back row. He just sighed and told me to study harder. I ate lunch in the library. After the first week, it was quiet there, and Mrs. Albright, the librarian, had kind eyes. She never asked why I was always alone, just gave me a small smile and let me be. I'd find a corner, read a book, and try to pretend the gnawing loneliness wasn't eating me. Up inside, at home, Mom would ask, "How was school, sweetie?" "Fine," I'd mumble, picking at my dinner. How could I tell her? She was so happy with her new job, so excited about our new life. I didn't want to be the dark cloud, but sometimes at night I'd cry into my pillow, silent sobs so she wouldn't hear. I missed my old friends, my old life, the feeling of belonging somewhere. Here, I felt like a ghost, and Jessica and her crew were the only ones who seemed to see me, only to remind me how unwelcome I was. The worst part was the feeling of helplessness. I wasn't a fighter. I didn't know how to be mean back. When they said something cruel, my mind would go blank, and only hours later, alone in my room, would I think of all the clever, cutting things I should have said. But in the moment, I just froze. One particularly rainy Tuesday, I was walking home, huddled under my too small umbrella. A car, Jessica's car, sped past, deliberately swerving into a huge puddle right beside me. A tidal wave of muddy, ice-cold water drenched me from head to toe. I heard their laughter ringing out as they drove off. I just stood there, shivering, water dripping from my hair, my clothes plastered to my skin, and something inside me just snapped. Not in an angry, explosive way, but in a quiet, tired way. I was done being their punching bag. I didn't know how, but I was done. That evening, soaked and miserable, I sat at my desk, not even bothering to change. Mom was working late. The house was quiet, except for the rain drumming against the window. I stared at my reflection in the dark glass. A drowned rat with sad eyes. And I thought about the one thing that used to make me feel strong, feel like me. My dad. He passed away when I was 10, but he'd left me with something precious. Music. He taught me to play the guitar, simple chords at first, then more complex melodies. He had a beautiful voice, and we used to sing together, silly songs, sad songs, songs he made up on the spot. After he was gone, the guitar sat in its case for a long time. It hurt too much to look at it. But eventually, I started playing again, just for myself. It was my secret, my comfort. I wasn't a great singer, not like a pop star, but I could carry a tune, and when I sang songs that meant something to me, it felt real. A flyer had been posted in the school hallway a week ago, half hidden behind a notice about football tryouts. Northwood High Annual Talent Show, sign-ups in the main office. I'd barely glanced at it then. The thought of standing on a stage in front of everyone, especially them, was terrifying. But now, drenched and defeated, a tiny rebellious spark ignited in that cold, wet feeling. What if? What if I could show them, show everyone that there was more to me than the clumsy, quiet new girl they tormented? The thought was so audacious it almost made me laugh. Me, on stage? But the more I thought about it, the more the spark grew. It wasn't about being famous, or even about winning. It was about taking back a little piece of myself. The next day, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, I walked into the main office during lunch. Mrs. Davison, the school secretary, a plump woman with a kind smile, looked up. "Can I help you, dear?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "The talent show? I'd like to sign up." She beamed. "Wonderful. What's your talent?" "Singing," I said, feeling my cheeks flush. "And I play guitar." "Lovely. Just fill this out." As I wrote my name, Maya Rodriguez, on the form, I felt a weird mix of terror and exhilaration. Jessica, Tiffany, and Chloe walked past the office just then, peering in. Jessica caught my eye, raised an eyebrow and smirked, then whispered something to Tiffany, who giggled. They probably thought I was in trouble again. If only they knew. The next few weeks were a blur of secret practice. Every evening, after homework, I'd go down to the basement. It was unfinished, a bit damp, with concrete walls and a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. But it was private. I'd pull out Dad's old acoustic guitar. Its wood was worn smooth in places from his hands, and it still smelled faintly of him. A mix of old paper and something uniquely his. I decided to sing a song I'd written myself. It wasn't something I'd ever shared with anyone. It was about feeling lost, about searching for a light in the darkness, about the memory of a guiding hand. It was about Dad, but it was also about how I felt right then, in this new, unfriendly place. The melody was simple, a little melancholic, but it felt honest. Practicing was hard. Sometimes my voice would crack, or my fingers would stumble on the chords. Doubt would creep in. What am I doing? This is insane. They'll laugh even harder. There were days I wanted to march back into the office and scratch my name off that list. The bullying didn't stop. If anything, it subtly intensified. They seemed to sense something was different about me, a new resolve maybe, and they didn't like it. One day, I found my locker open, my art project, a delicate clay sculpture I'd spent weeks on, smashed to pieces on the floor. My art teacher, Ms. Peretti, was understanding, but I saw the pity in her eyes. That night, I cried, really cried, for the first time in front of Mom. She just held me. "Oh, honey," she said, stroking my hair. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" Between sobs, I told her everything. The tripping, the whispers, the notes, the car wash incident, the smashed sculpture. And then, I told her about the talent show. She pulled back, looking at me, her eyes wide. "You're going to sing? In front of everyone?" I nodded, wiping my tears. "I have to, Mom. I don't know what else to do. I can't let them win. Not like this." A slow smile spread across her face. "Your dad would be so proud, Maya. So proud." Her belief in me was like a warm blanket. It didn't make the fear go away, but it made it easier to bear. The day of the talent show arrived like a looming storm cloud. My stomach was in knots. I could barely eat breakfast. At school, the buzz was all about the show. Jessica and her friends were preening, talking loudly about how Chloe was going to do a dance routine and how she was totally going to win. They shot me a few disdainful glances, probably wondering why I even bothered showing up to school. That afternoon, during last period, Jessica accidentally spilled a carton of juice down the front of my shirt. "Oh, clumsy me," she said, her eyes glinting. "Guess you'll have to perform looking like a mess, if you even have the guts to perform at all, new girl." My heart sank. This was the shirt I'd planned to wear. It wasn't fancy, just a simple dark blue top that I felt comfortable in. Now it was sticky and stained. Tears threatened again, but I blinked them back hard. No. Not today. After school, Mom met me with a small bag. "Emergency supplies," she said with a wink. Inside was a clean, soft black t-shirt and a small encouraging note. "Sing from your heart, sweetie. That's all that matters." Backstage felt chaotic. People were rushing around, tuning instruments, practicing lines, adjusting costumes. I saw Chloe in a sparkly, skimpy dance outfit, practicing pirouettes and looking incredibly confident. Jessica and Tiffany were fawning over her. Jessica caught my eye again, gave me a pitying look, and then turned back to Chloe, whispering something. That made them all laugh. I found a quiet corner, took out my guitar, and started to tune it. My hands were so sweaty I was afraid I'd drop the pick. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to run, to hide, to disappear. Mrs. Davison, who was helping to organize backstage, came over. "Maya, dear, you're on after the magic act. You doing okay?" I tried to smile, but it probably looked more like a grimace. "Just a bit nervous." "You'll be wonderful," she said, patting my shoulder. "Break a leg," which I knew was a good luck saying, but at that moment, it sounded rather literal. The magician was surprisingly good. The audience roared with applause. And then a voice boomed over the speakers. "And now please welcome a new face to Northwood High, Maya Rodriguez, who will be singing an original song." My legs felt like lead. My throat was dry. I could hear a few scattered, polite claps. And then, distinctly, a snicker from the front rows where I knew Jessica and her crew were sitting. I walked out onto the stage. The lights were blinding. I couldn't see individual faces, just a dark, anonymous sea beyond the glare. I fumbled for the microphone, adjusted the stand, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I sat on the stool provided, settled the guitar on my lap. My fingers felt stiff and clumsy. I took a deep breath, like Dad used, to tell me. Just you and the music, Maya. Nothing else. I looked out into the darkness, picturing Mom's encouraging smile, Mrs. Albright's kind eyes, even Ms. Peretti's sympathetic face. And then, I thought of Dad. I closed my eyes for a second, and then I began to play. The first few chords were a little shaky. I could feel the silence of the auditorium, a heavy, expectant silence. I started to sing, my voice small at first, almost a whisper. Lost in the echoes, a shadow in the gray, searching for a whisper to help me find my way. As I sang the first verse, my voice gained a little strength. I opened my eyes, focusing on a point at the back of the hall, trying to channel all the loneliness, all the hurt, all the quiet determination into the words. A memory of a hand, a song upon the breeze, a promise in the starlight rustling through the trees. I risked a glance towards where I thought Jessica's group was. I couldn't see their expressions clearly, but I could feel their gaze. The snickering had stopped. The chorus came, and I put everything I had into it. My voice, still not powerful, but clear and true, filled with an emotion I hadn't known I could project. But I'll find my light. I'll find my song, even when the road is hard, even when it's long. This quiet heart has learned to beat to the rhythm of my own 2 feet. As I moved into the second verse, something shifted. The guitar felt like an extension of me. The notes flowed more easily. My voice, though still trembling slightly, found a core of strength. I wasn't thinking about being perfect. I was just singing my story. I sang about feeling invisible, about the sting of unkind words, but also about the hope that refused to die. When I got to the bridge, the part that was most directly about my dad, my voice thickened with emotion. But I didn't let it break. There was a voice that taught me courage. In a melody so sweet, now I carry it inside me. With every fragile beat, I could feel a change in the audience. The silence was different now. It wasn't just expectant, it felt attentive, like they were really listening. For the final chorus, I let my voice soar as much as it could. I wasn't trying to impress. I was just letting go. I poured out all the pain of the past few months, but also the tiny, flickering flame of hope that had kept me going. When the last chord faded, I sat there for a moment, my fingers still resting on the strings, my chest heaving slightly. The silence stretched. For a terrifying second, I thought, they hate it. They're going to laugh. My stomach plummeted, and then someone started clapping, then another and another, and suddenly, the whole auditorium erupted in applause. It wasn't just polite. It was warm, genuine. It washed over me, a wave of sound that felt like acceptance. I looked up, dazed. People were smiling. Some were even standing. My eyes scanned the front rows. Jessica, Tiffany, and Chloe were just sitting there. Chloe looked uncomfortable. Tiffany was staring at her hands. And Jessica's face was a mask. Her mouth was a thin line. She wasn't clapping. She looked stunned, almost angry? Or was it something else? I couldn't quite read it. But the smirk was gone. Completely gone. I managed a shaky smile, mumbled a thank you into the microphone, and practically ran off stage, my guitar clutched to my chest. Backstage, Mrs. Davison was beaming, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Maya, that was beautiful, dear. Absolutely beautiful." Mom was there too, rushing towards me, her face glowing. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "Oh, my baby, you were incredible. I'm so proud of you." Tears were streaming down my face now, but they weren't sad tears. They were tears of relief, of release. I didn't win the talent show. Chloe's flashy dance routine did, which was fine. I hadn't expected to win. That wasn't the point. But something had changed. The next day at school was different. People looked at me differently. A girl from my English class, Sarah, who'd never spoken to me before, came up and said, "Your song was amazing. It really made me think." A guy from the football team gave me a nod in the hallway. Small things, but they felt huge. And Jessica, Tiffany, and Chloe, they avoided me. At first, I thought it was just a new tactic, but it was different. When our paths crossed, they wouldn't meet my eye. The whispers stopped. The snide comments dried up. It was like the air had been let out of their balloon. One afternoon, about a week later, I was in the library, my usual sanctuary. I was actually reading for pleasure, not just hiding. I heard footsteps and looked up. It was Jessica, alone. My heart gave a little jump of apprehension. Here it comes, I thought. She stood there for a moment, fiddling with the strap of her backpack. She looked smaller somehow, without her entourage. "Hey," she said, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. It was so different from her usual cutting tone. "Hi," I replied, cautious. She shifted her weight. "That song? You wrote it?" I nodded. It was pretty good," she mumbled, looking at the floor. Then she looked up, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't mockery or disdain. It looked a bit like confusion, maybe even a tiny bit of shame. "Thanks," I said, genuinely surprised. She hesitated again. "Look, about, all that stuff." She waved a hand vaguely. "We were just being jerks. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was more than I'd ever expected." "Yeah," I said softly. "You were." She winced, then nodded quickly. "Right. Well, see ya." And she turned and hurried out of the library. It wasn't like we became friends. We didn't. But the reign of terror was over. They left me alone. And in leaving me alone, they gave me space to breathe, to be myself. Slowly, I started making actual friends. Sarah from English class invited me to study with her. A quiet boy named Liam in art class, who also loved to draw, started talking to me about different artists. We found we had a lot in common. Lunch in the library became less of a necessity and more of a choice, sometimes with Sarah or Liam joining me. I realized that what I'd done on stage hadn't just been for them. It had been for me. I'd found my voice, literally and figuratively. I'd shown them and myself that I wasn't just the new girl. I was Maya. And Maya had a story, a song, a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Sometimes I'd see Jessica in the halls. She'd usually look away quickly. I don't think she ever truly regretted the meanness for my sake. I think she regretted looking foolish. She regretted being shown up, not by someone loud and aggressive, but by someone quiet. Someone she'd underestimated. She regretted that her power, built on making others feel small, had been so easily deflated by a simple song. And that, I think, was enough. It wasn't a Hollywood ending where the bullies see the error of their ways and we all sing Kumbaya, but it was real. I learned that sometimes the biggest statements are made quietly, and that courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about being terrified and doing it anyway. I still played my dad's guitar in the basement, but now sometimes I'd play with my window open, letting the music drift out into the evening air. I wasn't hiding anymore. I had found my place, not by changing who I was, but by finally letting myself be seen. And that felt like the biggest win of all.